Hey, welcome to Radicalize Me. If you enjoy this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you can, support us on Patreon for more videos, podcasts, and music. I'm doing something a bit different today. I'm going to comment on a video about music. Music is my true expertise, but it's very much tied up in my interest of politics. The video I'll be talking about today is called The Death of Melody from the channel Inside the Score. It has almost 2 million views, and most of the comments seem to agree that Melody is dead or dying. Now, I've seen videos like this before, and if they're not specifically about Melody, they're usually about how music is getting worse, whatever that means. And the evidence, if you can call it that, usually amounts to there aren't enough notes or chords, which is such a flawed metric, but that seems to be the best they can come up with. So that's what I expected going into this video. Let's see if I was wrong.
But today I want to expand a little and talk about a problem which seems to have infected all of Western music.
Whoa. Infected all of Western music? Okay. This is the politics creeping in. I'm sure this is not intentional, and I hesitate to even say this, but he's really coming in hot here with language commonly used as a white nationalist dog whistle, infectious ideas, and defending Western values or whatever. This might be just my very online politics brain playing tricks on me, but not a great look.
I call it the death of melody. Bit dramatic, I know, but wait and see. Aaron Copland, the famous American composer, once said that music was made up of 4 central components: melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. But the truth is, melody on its own encompasses all the other 3 things on this list.
The 4 central components. This is always where this conversation goes. Am I listening to Ben Shapiro right now?
Okay. And rap only fulfills one of these, the rhythm section.
There is certainly a science to music, but music is not something that you just go to a textbook and be like, see, this is what it is. You are wrong, sir. If there is an umbrella definition of music, I prefer the one I heard from respected musicians growing up.
My music theorist father who went to music school,
which is that music is just organized sound. My musical upbringing was a pretty traditional classical path, but many of my peers and mentors adhered to this definition and respected other musical practices. And don't get me wrong, this melody, harmony, rhythm, tone color thing is important, and it does explain a lot of how Western music works. But that's the thing, it's how Western music works. Plenty of musical traditions around the world and throughout history put different emphasis on one or more of these elements. There's Yue drumming that's much more focused on rhythm and tone color than anything else. Traditional music of East and Southeast Asia seems to focus on tone more than other cultures, and they also use harmony very differently and in some cases don't put much emphasis on it. And I don't know a whole lot about theory outside of Western music, and neither does this guy. And that's just because Western music education is not great at incorporating other traditions besides classical. Jazz has made its way in, but even that was a struggle. So I don't totally fault this guy for having this view, but it's really just a prejudice that comes from the somewhat limited scope of our education, which causes this knee-jerk reaction to anything that deviates from the norm. Now, he mentions Copland again here, and I must say, Aaron Copland is one of my favorite composers, but he's not the be-all, end-all authority on what is music because he named these 4 components. And I'm not aware of the context in which Copland said this, but I'd be willing to bet he did not say it with the intention of being a gatekeeper or to put down musical traditions other than his own. Also, he was a communist and got blacklisted in the 50s by Joe McCarthy, which is based. If you haven't heard Copland before, you actually probably have, but if you're not familiar with him off the top of your head, I highly recommend you pause and go listen to Fanfare for the Common Man, a short piece that'll give you a good sense of his work. All right, Copland is one of these deeply American 20th century composers like George Gershwin, Leonard Bernstein, Alec Wilder, and you can hear it in his music. You know, it has a lot of big Western frontier energy, especially in pieces like Billy the Kid and Rodeo. If you can't tell from the titles. Now, these composers expanded upon and often shirked completely the traditions of European classical music by playing with form and incorporating elements of jazz and folk music into orchestral soundscapes in ways that had never been done before. If anyone understood the ever-changing nature of music composition, it's Copland. Plus, he wrote most of his music between 1925 and 1960, and he died 30 years ago. So if he didn't understand, screw him.
The absence of melody is a huge trend.
The absence of melody is a huge trend. I'm not sure what huge trend means because he never really backs this up. We're about to see him give a few examples, but why wouldn't he put a little more research into this video? Put some numbers together. Show us a time frame and demonstrate this gradual loss of melody throughout it based on some sample size of popular music.
Take pop, for example. I remember clubbing to this song as a teenager.
I wanna hold 'em like they do in Texas, please. Fold 'em, let 'em hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me.
One note.
Poker Face, released in 2008, is a pretty bad example of his argument to start out with, honestly. First of all, I thought he said melody was dying, not that it's just too simple now. Like, is there no melody, or you just want more notes in your melody? Here's one little section of a piece by Franz Schubert, who apparently is considered to be one of the greatest melody writers ever.
Einen Weiser seh ich stehen, verrückt vor meinem Blick.
This is just one part of the song, specifically the verse. And sure, verse melodies aren't usually just one note, but Lady Gaga isn't wrong here just because she went a little outside convention. This is just bad musical analysis. If you know the song, you know the next part is the pre-chorus, followed by the chorus. It sounds to me like there are plenty of notes in those sections to fill his pretty little head with. In fact, the very absence of movement and melodic complexity in the verse comes across as an intentional step in building toward the intensity of the chorus. There's a reason Gaga was popular. This is great songwriting. His decision to start off with this dishonest example, I'll say, is very telling.
Or what about the whole chorus of that One Direction song that put them on the map? It has a range spanning 3 notes.
I mean, a 3-note melody is undoubtedly simpler than a 4 or more note melody, but this is by no means unheard of. In 1989, the year I was born, Tom Petty released a song called Free Fallin'. Ever heard of it? This song also uses only 3 notes. The same 3 notes as One Direction, actually. The first, second, and third notes of the major scale. And they use the same chords. 1, 4, and 5. Those are quite popular, as you may know. The One Direction song is just a half step lower. And yet, do these songs sound the same? No, because both were written by talented songwriters who know how to create something beautiful and memorable, even with simple, limited material. The next 2 examples are Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish. And I have to say, if this guy wants to convince me that modern music sucks, he better stop showing me bangers.
What if we go a little more recent? How about Taylor Swift? The verse has 3 notes. The lead up to the chorus has 2 notes. And the chorus itself uses no notes.
Okay, see, here's where it just gets silly. If you're straight up tallying the notes in a song, I just don't think you're listening for the right reasons. This isn't musical critique, it's just imaginary scorekeeping that doesn't matter at all. But as long as we're doing it, I'll point out that there are actually 4 notes in the verse melody. As for the 2-note part, we already talked about how 1 note can be used for build-up, so 2 is fine. 2. And we'll get more into this later, but this type of talk singing isn't new, And it doesn't mean the singer isn't hitting pitches in an intentional way. Here's a piece called Piero Lunaire by Arnold Schoenberg from 1912.
Gestillt wär all mein Sinnen, dürft ich so märchenheim.
And even more recent, I heard this Billie Eilish song on the radio the other day.
White shirt, now red, my bloody nose sleeping. You're on your tippy toes.
Bear in mind that all of these songs have been massive #1 hits in at least one major country in the world, and all of them lack an interesting melody.
Subjective, not interesting to you.
Now, I'm in no way saying that these songs are bad songs.
You kind of are, but okay.
In fact, this week I've been finding the Eilish song incredibly catchy, perhaps because of its hypnotic repetitiousness. These songs may be good songs for other reasons, but you wouldn't describe any of them as having a strong melody. And if there is melody there, it's not used as an expressive tool.
Not used as an expressive tool? Who says? I'd say these melodies are simple because the artists are using them as expressive tools. He just said right before this that he found Bad Guy by Billie Eilish catchy because of its hypnotic repetition. Exactly. You got it. That's the expression she's creating with the tool of melody. It's just a different approach. It's all vibes. And it's really cool if you give it a chance. You know, we talked earlier about world music that emphasizes or de-emphasizes the 4 elements of music in different ways, and none of those are less legitimate forms of music. Why should this be any different? Unless you're just trying to preserve the purity of Western culture, which, again, that's a little dog whistly.
You might say, but it's not supposed to have melody. That's part of the style. That's what gives it its edge.
No one says that.
Of course, having a melody which spans 1 to 3 notes makes it extremely easy to sing along with too.
Once more, nailed it.
This trend of no melody has passed on to other areas of Western music too.
Having no melody. See, again, is it that songs have no melody, or do they have melodies that are too simple for you?
Take film music superstar Hans Zimmer.
You leave Hans Zimmer alone. Bois is one of my favorite movie scores of all time. ITS acknowledges here that Zimmer's minimalist scores work for these movies, but keeps saying it's because melody went out of fashion. I don't think that's true. I just think we have different types of movies being made now, and not everything's going to have a triumphant little Indiana Jones ditty. And if it's true that melody has gone out of fashion, ITS has not demonstrated it in this video. This is basically a list of subjective complaints peppered with authoritative sounding statements that he can't really back up.
The trend has even spread to modern classical music. Take a fantastic, well-loved, high-quality piece of modern classical music, The 7 Last Words from the Cross by James Macmillan. It has great harmony, great tone color, and then there's this tortured, lashing, delirious rhythm of them hammering excruciating nails into the cross.
I'm not familiar with this piece. I honestly, I'm not really up on modern classical music. The clips he played here do sound short on melody, but, you know, given his intellectual dishonesty from the outset of this video, I'd be willing to bet he just left out the more melodic sections. Next, he gives 2 examples of what he sees as good pop music with good melodies. And these are I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles, released in 1963, Wonderful Tonight by Eric Clapton, released in 1977, and We Are the Champions by Queen, also released in 77. Then he says,
At some point, pop music discovered the power of a strong hook, and how catchy a repetitive hook could be. Take Led Zeppelin's Whole Lotta Love.
Hold on. I have a question. Whole Lotta Love was released in 1969, almost a full decade before 2 of the good melody songs he just listed. I realize he's not saying Whole Lotta Love came out, then music sucked from that point on, but this seems like a pretty big oversight. I thought we were talking about modern pop music de-emphasizing melody, not repetitive guitar riffs in late 60s hard rock. That's another thing, by the way. Whole Lotta Love is a real squirrely example because he's complaining about the rhythm guitar riff, not the melody. Also, since when is a repeated phrase an illegitimate musical practice? Maybe if ITS cracked open one of his music theory textbooks, he'd find a definition for ostinato. Oh, what's this right here? Ostinato, a motif or phrase that persistently repeats in the same musical voice, frequently in the same pitch. Well-known ostinato-based pieces include both classical compositions, such as Ravel's Bolero and Carol of the Bells, and popular songs such as Donna Summer and Giorgio Moroder's I Feel Love, 1977, Henry Mancini's theme from Peter Gunn, 1959, and The Verve's Bittersweet Symphony from 1997. It sounds to me like Led Zeppelin was participating in a musical tradition that's been going on for hundreds of years.
With the rise of electronic music, we were given techno, technology-driven music, and while most of this music wasn't necessarily mainstream, it reflects a real lack of melodiousness in favor of other qualities. That's an excerpt from I Wanna Be a Hippie, which reached #1 in several countries in Europe in the 90s.
I mean, yeah, it sounds like a dumb club song, but this is the electronica my friends and I were listening to back in high school around the same time.
Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger, more than ever, hour after hour, work is never over.
Yeah, you thought Kanye West wrote that, didn't you? How's that for melody?
And then there's the domination of rap or hip-hop.
Jesus Christ, do I really have to explain why rap and hip-hop are music? Again, am I listening to Ben Shapiro right now?
My music theorist father, who went to music school.
12 Tone gave a much better explanation of how rap handles melody than I'll be able to do here, so be sure to watch that video too. But suffice to say that rappers do often sing, but even when they don't, they're still very intentional about pitch. Take this line from Airplanes by B.O.B.
Somebody take me back to the days before this was a job, before I got paid.
He changes the pitch of his voice throughout the line. Look, this verse from Airplanes wouldn't be the same if it was like, somebody take me back to the day before this was a job, before I got paid. And sure, that's partly because I'm a white nerd, but you take my point all the same.
Then there's the rise of the remix too, where they take an old, longer song and remix it. But more and more, DJs will just surgically remove 10-second or even 5-second snippets from a song and use that to form their new catchy hook, transforming it from older, more melodic music to a catchy hook with very little melody.
Yeah, sorry, they made it better. The old version is stupid and boring, and no one would care about it if someone hadn't sampled it. I don't know what song this is, if that's any indication, but I guarantee that at least a few people heard the remix and went, I wonder what that old song is that they used pieces of, and went to look it up. ITS is, again, kind of lying to you by omission here. Earlier, he used the Beatles as an example of the high IQ, big dick melody writing of yesteryear. He played us the song I Want to Hold Your Hand, a song that admittedly has a great melody. But here, when he brings up the modern crime of music sampling, he conveniently doesn't mention the Beatles and the heavy influence on them from black blues and early rock and roll artists, especially Chuck Berry. Some of their songs, like the one called Rock and Roll Music, are literally Chuck Berry songs. Some others, like Twist and Shout and Till There Was You, were covers written by other artists. Of course, the Beatles mostly performed original music, but even that was heavily influenced by other artists. They would literally listen to other artists, like Little Richard, who did a lot of little screams and woos and stuff in his music, and they'd be like, that sounds cool, we should do that in our music too. That's all. They literally lifted that right out of a different artist's music and put it in their own. Why is that different? Sampling or remixing or copying or whatever you want to call it is as old as time in the music world.
History has often cried the death of melody, with Beethoven, with Mahler, and with the 20th century atonal movement, where melody sometimes became unfollowable. But I think this age today marks a point where melody really isn't being used as an expressive tool anymore.
You know what? You're an expressive tool, dude. Once more, he can't settle on an argument. Is it that melody isn't there, is too simple, or that it isn't being used as an expressive tool? Whatever the fudrucker that means. Also, he did the thing. Look, I know literally every generation has refused to see the legitimacy of the next generation's art, but this time it's different thing.
It still exists, as in, there are still notes that you can follow and sing along with, but it no longer has the expressive quality of the melodies of the past.
Subjective, not an argument.
And I think this is going to be the topic of my next video. What makes good melody? What does it mean to have expressive melody? And how might we save melody?
Get over yourself. Stop it. You're not saving anything, and it doesn't need saving. I'd like to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters, Adam Bowman, and that's it. Hey, gotta start somewhere. Thanks to Adam, who also happens to be a great leftist YouTuber out of Australia. Go check out Only Dog on the Left on YouTube to find his work. Thanks so much for watching. Again, you can find us at patreon.com/radicalizeme if you'd like to contribute. If not, that's cool too. You can also like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share, all of which are free, baby. My podcast, also called Radicalize Me, is available on all platforms. And I will talk to you next time. Bye now.